Sit back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I am here today to do a couple of book reviews for you. There are 3 books that I recently read and very much enjoyed and wanted to kind of give you a little sit down video review of them. I have been meaning to get back into doing more reviews as I go now that I'm actually back to YouTube again. So you can probably expect more of these as the year goes on. Now that I finished the SBFBO reviews for the year, it will mainly be kind of my own books, which is always nice. So yeah, let's just dive straight in. There are 3 books I want to talk about. One of them is self-published and 2 are traditionally published, so let's get started. So the first book I want to talk about is one I've had on my shelf for years. It must be years. I have been meaning to read Melanie Rawn's books for I don't even know how long. But this is Dragon Prince. It's the first one in a series by her. I believe there are quite a few in the series and maybe a couple others like set in a later series in the same world, but correct me if I am wrong. But this is the first one, which came out in 1988. So it's a little tiny mass market paperback. It's one I've owned for a long time. It was secondhand, hence it's all broken and very sun damaged on the spine and a little bit ripped, but it's fine, it works, and I definitely enjoyed reading this. I didn't know what to expect really, because I knew that Melanie Rawn was one that a lot of people like and recommend her books to me quite frequently, but I hadn't really heard her name bandied around very often recently. It tended to be more when I started YouTube, people were recommending it as like something I should go and give a try to, and I really did enjoy this, but it is a slow burn, and there's also a couple trigger warnings for things like rape, which definitely happens in this book, arson, murder, violence, you name it, it's probably in here, but particularly I think the rape is one of the more traumatic things in this book. Yeah. This is a strange one. It's a world where we are following a main character who's a prince, hence the title, and he is called Rohan, and he is a prince who has always felt a little bit overshadowed by his father, who's kind of like the king of this desert land. His father's always been kind of the one that he looks up to and respected, and all of the people in his father's court definitely look to his father over him. And one day his father does end up dying quite early on in this book, and he obviously has to step into the role of his father figure, and he needs to kind of take command of a land which never really... It's not that it didn't expect him to come to the throne, because obviously once his father died, it would have been that way, but his father dies a little bit prematurely of what is expected, and so he is kind of forced into this role a bit earlier than expected. But he does handle it very well, and I think he is a character who takes a little bit of getting used to. He's kind of more scholarly than he is princely, but he has one of those brains where he can think outside the box, and he starts to kind of try and plan his way of doing things a little bit differently from all the ways that his father previously did it. He wants to make his mark on the world and stand out, and he wants to really do what he can to protect his people, but also do things differently from the past. Alongside him, the other main character that we have is Shmidt, who is actually a Sunrunner witch, which is the power source in this world. Alongside there obviously being dragons, there are dragons in this world. There are powerful magic users who are called Sunrunners, and they can essentially travel on the light of the sun to communicate with other people. It's a bit of a strange power, but I like the idea. And basically, if you are a Sunrunner, or if you have the ability or the knack to be contacted by a Sunrunner, then they can travel on light if they know your light signature, and they can communicate with you. So it's kind of like a form of distance communication, but it also has other powers to do with like burning and generally kind of using magic. So it's a pretty powerful resource, and Shmidt is our main character who is a Sunrunner. She is actually coming to meet the prince. She has been preordained in a way to become his bride, and she doesn't know if that's a good or bad thing. She's kind of just been told that's her role. But, of course, luckily, things do go well between them, and they kind of have a bit of a love at first sight situation, and they have to navigate how to get their relationship to work, but also how to stick to their duties. The Sunrunners have their own duties, the prince has his own duties, and they need to work out whether they can get those duties to align, alongside fighting against the other political factions of this world, where enemies definitely border them, and there's a lot of betrayal and trickery in their neighbouring kind of kingdoms. So it's definitely political. It's a slow mover. It's one that takes a bit of getting used to, kind of the magic in the world, and it does feel like it really starts quite gradually and then builds up towards the end where things get a lot more dramatic. I enjoyed it a lot, and I do think it's a really fun read, but I feel like it's not going to work for everyone because of that slow beginning. I, however, did enjoy it, and I do think I will continue on with the rest of the series. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I definitely think if you like a slower, kind of more gradual fantasy that does have dragons and magic, then this might be one that you want to give a try to. The next one that I want to talk about is a book that recently came out. I think it was in the last month actually. So for once I'm reviewing something new, and this was sent to me by Orbit, so I'm always really grateful to get copies of their books, and this particularly is one that I was really excited about. It's called The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, and the authors of this is actually a combination of 2 authors. We have Marie Brennan, who's one of my favourite authors anyway. She wrote the Lady Trent series, and then she is writing with her friend Alec Helms, who I haven't read anything by until now, but I definitely think I should because I really enjoyed this combination of the 2 of them writing together. I feel like it's a very natural kind of partnership. It didn't feel forced or overworked in any way, and I really enjoyed the story. It's a slow-moving story again, but I think in a very different way from Dragon Prince. This one is slow because it's a plot, it's a ploy, and it's a kind of trickery situation where our main character is essentially running a con. She is, or was, a street rat who grew up on the streets and had to beg and steal to survive. But she has to flee that life because the person that she was working for is horrendous and she has to eventually kill them. And that all happens really quickly, so that's not a spoiler, it's just something that happens pretty immediately in the book. But she then has to flee, obviously, because if it was known that she was the one on the streets who killed her master, she would be in deep, deep trouble. So she flees with her friend, who's basically a sister to her, and they go to another place. And there they learn about this nobility family who are kind of struggling and a little bit out of the way from where they are. And they think that they can run a con on this family to get riches and to become noble and basically set themselves up for the future. So they go back to this place and they try and infiltrate into the noble house by running a con about who they are, where they come from, and exactly what they know. So that's kind of the general plot. And our main character is called Ren. She was originally a street rat and now she is playing a noble. Ren is really, really great as a character, and I really enjoyed seeing her grow over the course of the book. I feel like she develops immensely, and she has a couple of different personas that she has to play based on kind of where she is and who she's meeting with and who she's trying to portray to that person. And I think she does each of them very well because each of them has an authenticity to them, because she does relate in some way to these characters, but equally she's good at putting on a mask. She's good at putting up a front and acting particularly well to get herself out of tricky situations. So I really enjoyed seeing her deception over the course of the book and how she thinks. Initially it's all about the money, but as the course of the book goes on, of course, things change, and she is forced to question whether the money is enough of an incentive to carry on with the con, or whether there's something else deeper going on. And I really liked seeing that personal progression with her. Her sister character is called Tess, and I love Tess. Tess is acting as her maid in the story, but she's actually a fashion designer. She designs all the outfits that Ren wears to all these nobility parties, and they are basically buying material really cheap, but then doing an amazing, exquisite job on the fashion. So fashion is such a big part of this book. It really does captivate the mind when they described the outfits that Ren was wearing and the masks that they use at these functions they do. I could visualize it really clearly, and I think the authors had a real way of really descriptively writing these amazing costumes and amazing outfits that I could picture in my head, which was really cool. So I love Tess. I think she's very sweethearted as well in general, and just, yeah, a lot of fun as a character, and I loved their relationship as kind of like sisters. The next main character is called the Rook. The Rook is kind of almost this Robin Hood vagabond character. He steals from the rich to give to the poor. He's on the side of the poor, helping them, working with them, trying to basically be the best representative that he can be for them. but working undercover because he is breaking the law quite frequently. He breaks into people's houses, he challenges nobles. Yeah, he's a bit of a Robin Hood kind of character, and I liked him because the whole way through this book there is a mystery about who he is, and he does end up meeting Ren quite early on, and a couple of events throughout the book they meet one another, but she's continually unsure who he is, and a lot of the mystery comes from who is the Rook and why is he doing what he does. And the Rook is a legend that's been around for hundreds of years, so obviously it can't always be one person. It's believed that it's one person passing the mantle on over the time, but no one knows who the current iteration of the Rook is, so I really like that mystery part of the book as well. Another of the more main characters is Vargo, who is a character that was, again, kind of a lower born character, but he's managed to work himself into a more business situation. He kind of had a crooked past doing crooked deeds to get into a better position with money, but he's trying to go straight now, and he's trying to put himself on the right course, and actually he wants to become a noble. So he's doing a lot of kind of working behind the scenes with people to try and clear his name and get him elevated and get him status, and Ren is one of the people that he does end up approaching to work with and kind of collude with, so it's quite a good relationship that they have over the course of the book, and I found it really interesting to see where his characterization went over the course of the book, because he is an enigma. He has a secret about him as well, which you find out more about as the story goes, but he's really interesting as a character, and he's another one of those characters who just feels like there's something more to them and you have to discover it as the reader, so I loved him kind of getting to know him. The other characters that we meet who are kind of more prominent include Liato, who is the noble-born son of the Tremantis house, which is the noble house that Ren and Tess are trying to infiltrate into. He is also quite an interesting character, even though he's a bit more of a minor one. We then have Gray, who is like a warden of sorts. He patrols the streets. He again was a lower class citizen who has kind of been elevated up through the ranks a little bit, so he doesn't really fit into nobility because he's much lower than them, but he also doesn't really fit into the street people because he's above them now. So he has a bit of a hard time finding his place in society, and also Liato and he are very good friends throughout the course of the book. The magic of this world is pretty fascinating and very vast. I feel like it doesn't get going until about halfway through. Up until then it's mainly this heist and this plot, but about halfway through the magic starts coming in a big way, and it starts to become much more interesting. There's this world of dreams, there's this world of kind of parallel universes, there's magic to do with the stars and the constellations and the months that you were born and the days. There's also magic that can imbue things, so you can give like power to certain objects, which is really cool as well. There's a lot in this world, and I think none of it's super explained, but all of it makes sense in the context of this world, and it just feels very deep and dark and sultry, which I liked a lot. I also think there's a lot of political manoeuvring. There's lots of various levels. As we say, we have the nobility, but we have the Watch, who are kind of called this Vigil, which is what Grey is a member of. We have the street rats and the street children, but then there's different factions within this people on the street as well about who comes from where and who allies with who, and then we have all the people in the middle of that as well. So there's a lot of different layers, and different people are on different levels of that. And yeah, it's kind of like a big game, really. Overall, this is a pretty long book, and I flew through it in a couple of days. I ended up just being completely absorbed into the story and really enjoyed it, and just, yeah, found myself getting lost in it way often. So I really, really recommend this, and I do think it's going to be one that a lot of people would really enjoy, especially if you love the darker side of fantasy, or if you like the more sultry, more soulful, more sultry, kind of seductive in the fabrics and the descriptions and the materials, but also just inventive and fun with the kind of magic and the systems that we're following, and the characters who are inventive and quirky as well. So lots to love about this, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars in the end. I hope the sequel for that one is coming soon, because I really want it. And the final one that I want to talk about in this video is the third one in a series. It's the third in the Arcane Ascension series, and this is a self-published series. So I have been getting them on audio or on Kindle or in physical edition. The first one is here actually, Sufficiently Advanced Magic, and I don't own the second one in physical yet, but I have read it. The third one is called The Torch That Ignites the Stars, and I really enjoyed this as well. I saw a couple of reviews saying that this one wasn't as good, and I don't know why, because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And this, again, follows the same characters as the first few, so I won't go into any spoilers, but basically we're following mainly Corin Cadence, who is our main character, and he is with his friends, a group of friends who have been very loyal to him throughout the book, and he and his friends go to a new place. This actually takes place over a vacation break rather than actually in a school term. Normally in these books we see them kind of going through a school term in a kind of Harry Potter-esque style, developing their skills with magic and learning about the spires. This world has magical spires, which are essentially huge spires that you can climb all the way up into the sky with, and you have to get through all these rooms that have traps, they have monsters, they have scenarios, they have puzzles. There's loads of different things that can be in these rooms in the spires, but if you do manage to get through them, then your magic level advances. This is a lit RPG series, so it's very much inspired by video gaming and that style of play. So I really like the ideas in this story, and I felt like this was another great installment in the series. I don't want to go into much detail on what happens exactly, but suffice to say they do travel away from where they normally are set, and we open up the world a lot more, which I really enjoyed. We see a couple of different places, including a new spire, but also we see temples and different places that are very different to what we come to know in our kind of section of the world. So I really like seeing Corin and his friends exploring those different elements. We also do have a trip into the spire, which I thought was fantastic, because they're always my favourite bits. It's just when they're journeying through these rooms, completing puzzles, taking on monsters, and just generally trying to build up their magic reserves. But obviously there's a lot more going on in the background with kind of major plot points that I don't want to give away, but I do really enjoy. And I think this one, although it feels like it is a little bit of a filler book with it being just focused on that school holiday rather than a school term, it didn't feel like it was boring in any way to me, and I felt like there were a lot of interesting things that the characters learnt that are going to really come in useful, and I feel like there are also lots of moments where we get hinted at things to come. I think there's going to be quite a few in this series. I don't believe the next one is the last one by any means, so there's going to be quite a few more books to come, and I'm very excited about that. So yeah, but I really enjoyed it and I gave it a 4 out of 5 overall, so I definitely recommend this series. As I say, it starts with Sufficiently Advanced Magic, and I will see if I can find my review of that one to link it for you if you're interested. So do let me know if any of these 3 appeal to you. I think they are some of the better ones that I've recently read, and I really enjoyed all of them, and I'd love to have your thoughts if you've read any of these authors or if you plan to pick any of these up. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.